Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our series of webinars. My name is Rachel Reed. I am Head of Digital Trading here at ETOA, and today we are discussing going digital in challenging markets. This is our first digitally focused webinar, and so we are delighted to launch with such an interesting topic. Before we get started with the presentation, just a couple of housekeeping points. You can ask questions at any time by clicking the icon at the top of your page, and we can cover these after the main presentation. And if you're having any technical problems, you can use the chat button at the bottom of the screen, and we will hopefully be able to help you out. I'm delighted this morning to have David McNeil of CDNetworks leading the topic today. And in a moment, I will hand over to him for his presentation. But before we do, we have a quick poll to garner some opinion from you, and we will reveal the results and the actual answers at the end of the presentation. So the question today, which you should be able to see on your screen now, is this: foreign brands face important web performance challenges in China and Russia. What do you think users in these markets do when a website is too slow to load? So choose your answer from the three. Thank you, everybody. I can see all the results coming in. We will collect those and let you know after David has finished speaking. So without further ado, I would like to hand you over to David McNeil to cover the main topic for the day.
Hi, well, thanks for the introduction. I'm just sharing my screen. Ooh. So yes, so my name is David McNeil and I am from CDNetworks. So I think this presentation due to last around 20 minutes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that we have at the end. So the topics that we're going to cover, just what's the actual importance of web performance is, and what the impact of the different regulations and rules that are in place in Russia as well as China, and focusing on the content restrictions, the infrastructure issues, security threats for Russia, and in China, the Great Firewall, web content regulations, and network challenges. So firstly, why does web performance matter? And that really comes down to, this quote here: before you marry a person, you should first make them use a computer with slow internet to see who they really are. And I think this is somewhere that we've all been. We've all been trying to load a website, or just use the internet in general, and just pulling our hair out where we can't actually do the tasks that we're trying to perform. This is more important, for businesses, where it's very easy these days for your customers to just go and find a competitor and use those services instead. So why are sites actually becoming or have issues with their speed? And it's simply because the end users are expecting more of them. And as a result of that, websites are becoming more complex, they're adding more personalized data, and they're expecting all this to be in real time. And a lot of this also comes down to things like the Google effect. So now if you perform a search on Google, as you're actually typing in your query, it starts to bring back results for you, and preempting what you're going to ask. And that kind of idea that the internet should be that immediate is starting to proliferate across the entire of our internet use. We expect everything to work just as quickly as that. that. And that's the same across the world in all regions. How this can actually affect your business. So this is a survey that was done by Bing and Google. And what they saw was that if there was a 1 second delay in loading of a page from the average, then that would result in a 3% drop in sales per customer. If there was a 3-second load time, that saw a 50% decrease in customer satisfaction. And if there was a 5-second load time, that had a 50% decrease in page views per person. Now, many people on the call will be able to actually take some of these stats, especially the 3% drop in sales, and actually be able to convert that into what that is having a monetary impact on your company. You'll actually be able to see what that cost is. So again, this just shows you how important it is to have a website that is loading quickly. So in Russia, the key things to look out for when going digital. So just as a quick highlight of the market, so it has the highest per capita GDP of all the BRIC markets. So that's Brazil, Russia, India, and China. It has the 7th largest labor force in the world. It's the 8th largest economy in the world. It is the number 2 in Europe for job creation. And its largest areas in services. So this is all going to show that it's an important market to get into, and hopefully there's money available to be able to spend on your services. Just to show that how it is the biggest area of the BRIC nations. This is a GDP per capita. We can see even compared to somewhere like China, which is massively increasing, it still has over double the GDP per capita. So some of the key challenges that people are seeing in Russia. So first one's being around content blocking. So there is a Russia firewall. I think many people are aware of the Great Firewall of China, but I don't think as many people are aware of the fact there is a Russia firewall in place. They have anti-piracy laws. They have recently introduced a blacklisting bill. And they also consider some different areas such as gambling as illegal content, and they won't allow you to deliver that content from within their borders. As well as this, they have poor internet connectivity. So, it has the largest landmass of any one single country in the world. And outside of the big cities, the internet access is very poor. They don't have the similar kind of bandwidth speeds that we'd expect to see in the UK or America or many other developed nations. Satellite internet connection is too expensive, so you can't rely on people to be using that as a way around the cabled internet. There is a lack of system monitoring tools, so it's very hard to actually get accurate information of what is happening or what a user experience is in those regions, and they have a high degree of packet loss. So all of these things together around the internet connectivity can mean it's very hard to actually deliver that content quickly and without having a big effect on the end users. So another big issue coming from Russia is the security. So these results were just something that we performed last week, and very quickly we're finding headlines from around the globe about different hacks, all originating, excuse me, all originating from within Russia. Now, with security attacks, they're getting easier and easier to occur or to carry out by the perpetrators. There are actually services online where people can go on to a website and say they basically order up a DDoS attack. So a denial of service attack where they can actually knock a website offline, and it's simply a service that is now offered. You can go on, ask the duration you want the attack to be and how much data you want, and they band their pricing based on those two criteria. So this is something that is easier and easier to do, and the vast majority of attacks in the world are being carried out from Russian gangs. So just moving on to China. So there's some similarities between China and Russia. So as we stated, they both have a firewall. They both look at the content. They're restrictive on what can actually be delivered. So some feedback on what a survey has said. So first thing is, local expertise is difficult to acquire. This is a very big market that does things very differently from the rest of the world. And having somebody on the ground in China is very useful, if not an absolute requirement, to actually understand all of the rules and regulations that are in place. As we can see, the laws and regulations are difficult to navigate and constantly evolving. So there is a ministry in charge of actually looking at what content is allowed through the Great Firewall, and they are constantly moving targets. You have to make sure that you are complying with everything they put in place, or you run the risks of having your website banned from being delivered from within China. The operational challenges are not intuitive. So again, the way that you're used to dealing with issues from delivering your sites in, for example, the UK or the US, they may not be the same issues you're going to have in China, or if they are the same issues, they may have different methods that you need to overcome them. You need a local relationship to survive. So again, going back to local expertise, having people on the ground or a local office is highly recommended. And China needs to be treated as a separate entity, not as an expansion of existing business. So kind of incorporating all of those points together, if you are trying to look at breaking out into China, you can't just think it's going to be business as usual. It has to be looked at on its own, have a good understanding of all the laws and regulations that are in place, and make sure that they are being adhered to. And I think it's also important that that message is spread out through all of your teams, so everybody understands exactly what the issues are and why they can't just go about, kind of day-to-day business as usual. Because it really is its own beast. It has to be looked at separately from how you deliver content to the rest of the world. Okay. So again, just from earlier this year, talking about the rules and regulations, currently there's been changes where if you are have your domain names registered, that you're going to need them to actually be registered from within China. And it's the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology that is looking at this, and they are the ministry that puts all of these rules and regulations in place. So straight away, if you don't actually have your domains registered from within China, in the near future, it's likely that they won't be allowed through and they will be blocked. Those rules aren't in place, aren't being enforced as of today, but all the indications that we have are in the near future that will be taking place. And again, the Great Firewall. So there are many different industries that they don't allow in. So again, things like adult pornography, gambling, anything with a that's political or anti-government is straight up forbidden. They won't allow that content in at all. The whole URL will be blocked, and they won't allow anybody to access that content. Anything with a religious angle or user-generated content or news has a higher risk level. So again, unless you are very closely adhering to their regulations, it's unlikely that that content will be allowed through. Again, so with the user-generated content, a lot of the blogs that are currently active within China, they are solely China-owned entities, so they are heavily regulated from within. But again, because they are based from within China, they know about these laws, and so they can adhere to them a lot easier. If it comes to gaming and entertainment, again, it's less severity, but there's still some risk associated with it. If it's software, enterprise, or e-commerce, there's a much lower risk. Now, for a lot of people, when they first look at this list, they think that is, it makes a lot of sense. It's very easy to see which bracket you come under, but it's also important to understand how these laws are actually enforced. So the ministry, as well as having actual agents that look at different websites and actually look at the content on an ongoing basis, they actually are looking to see if anything breaches this. But they also have automated systems. And when it comes to automated systems, when it comes to things like pornography, what they're looking for is things of lots of images that have a high level of skin-toned flesh. So in this instance, we have seen things, images that have showing piglets have ended up being blocked because it's made that connection between the color of the skin and possibly it being an adult site. I think for the travel industry, this is also very important to note. If you do have lots of images of people sunbathing and things of that nature, then there is a possibility that that can be picked up by the automated service and either be triggered an investigation or just be outright blocked straight away. So again, just because you think it's travel, it's all going to be fine, it is very worth actually thinking about the contents, the images that you have on the site, to make sure you're not going to run foul of some of these rules and regulations. That also means things like Google and Facebook links that you may have on your page, they are also blocked. So this is coming back to treating the website as something completely different. If you're currently using any plugins or any third-party content from those URLs, the rest of the page will load, but that content will be blocked. Then depending on how you actually have your page created, that can have a knock-on effect and delay the full page from actually being delivered. So to actually be able to deliver content from within China, so from within the mainland of China, you need a ICP BAYN license. And again, this is handed out by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. And to apply for one of these licenses, you first have to make sure that you're not on one of the banned industries. You need to have a legal entity within China, and that entity has to be a office, have a Chinese employee with a contact details, and the whole process involves actually having to go to the ministry, sending that employee or that resource to the ministry office with their identification. And it's very much like having a passport or driving license application. They take your photo, they check that they are who they say they are and that they belong to that company. That starts the process. They then do some checks to make sure the type of content and the business that you are. And at the end of it, they will then provide you with this license. With this license, it is just a number that they would then like to actually see delivered on the website. So if you go to some websites that actually have this license, if you scroll to the very bottom of the page, you will see in the footer something that says ICP and then some Chinese characters and then the number. And that will actually be their license number. And again, this is very clearly then demonstrates to the authorities that when they are looking at the site, that this has gone through the process and that it is that the license has been granted. But it is important to state, just because you have that license, that doesn't mean that they don't then carry on checks on the website. So it is a ongoing process. They will continue to look at the content that you're delivering and making sure that you are adhering to all of the rules that they have in place. Okay. So I think another thing that is important is a lot of people have stories, and I certainly have, of hearing that Chinese users can get around these issues by using VPNs and to actually connect to this content from outside of China. But there have been surveys done that actually show that not everybody is willing to do this, and to be honest, not everybody believes that. A lot of the population believe the government should be looking at the content and blocking it. So you can't expect the end users to be basically jumping through different hoops, different technical methods to get around these issues, especially if you have a competitor that it's much easier for them to access that content. If you have two websites, one of them you have to connect to your VPN, which is again going to slow down the delivery of the content, to then get onto a website to then perform whatever task or search for a holiday that you're looking to do, versus just opening a web browser and navigating directly to a competitor. I think most people would actually just go for the easier option. People just want the easy life. They don't want to have to jump through all those issues. So you can't guarantee that just because there possibly are technical workarounds that people are going to go for them. And also there's still the issue with the actual performance they'll get through using those technical workarounds. So again, the way that, or another reason why there are so many issues from within China, is down to how the individual internet service providers are broken down within China. So in the UK or America, we have very good peerage between the ISPs, so they very happily transfer data from one ISP to another, and they that means that the data can flow very freely throughout the internet. Just allows that data to get from the origin to the end user. In China, that's not the case. It's almost as if there's these separate ISP kingdoms, and each one looks after their area and doesn't want to communicate very well with other ISPs in other locations. It's almost a ISP war going on to actually try and shut down or encroach on other ISPs' territory and increase their network presence in new regions. What this means is that transferring that data freely throughout China has lots of issues. Without trying to get too technical, the packets of data will be rerouted time and time again, which for the end user translates as a bad experience. There'll be long waits for the pages to actually deliver, and it can vary from region to region. So somebody that's in Shanghai may have a great connection to your website, but as soon as you go to Beijing, they may not have as good a experience. So again, it's not the case of just thinking, well, if I'm delivering my site well in one location, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be delivered well throughout all of China. So again, it is worth doing tests in various locations to actually see if you are having issues in some areas and not others, because you don't want to lose access to a large proportion of the population just because you happen to be delivering the content well through one ISP and not another. One thing that we are also noting on this map is that Hong Kong actually is on the outside of the Great Firewall of China and isn't restricted by the same kinds of regulations as being delivered from mainland China. So in Hong Kong, you do not need the ICP ban license, but anywhere on the mainland, you will. So what now? So the key takeaways from this is that creating a site that will meet users' expectations takes a lot of time, effort, and resources. And once you've actually input all of that time and effort, you don't want to then find that in some of your key markets, if you are expanding into China, that site isn't loading quickly, it doesn't load every time, or that it gets blocked. That would be, I know it'd be frustrating for me. I'm sure it'd be frustrating for your developers and as well for the actual business as well. Actually making sure that you are getting a good return on the investments on those websites. So some key takeaways. Do make sure that your content doesn't get blocked. So just simple things like thinking about the images you're using on the site, making sure that it's not being picked up by those automated methods. Do be aware of the regulations for doing business in China and Russia, specifically if you are looking to trade online. So make sure that you are adhering to the rules and the regulations that they have in place, and making sure that you're staying on top of any changes that do take place. And do integrate regulatory and technical aspects into your marketing strategy. So again, if you are looking at pushing more traffic from these regions, make sure you are ready to actually take on that traffic, and that you're going to be delivering a website quickly and it's not going to be blocked in those locations. And again, going right back to the beginning, that speed and security do matter. just because you have a website that is accessible. If it's taken that website 20 seconds or longer to load, especially within China, then the end users will just move on to a different supplier or one of your competitors, because there is so much choice out there now. It's very easy for the end user just to search around and find something that works for them. So just a little bit about what we do and with a CDN. So we actually help overcome these challenges by using our network. So we have points of presence throughout the world, but that includes nodes across all of Russia. So we have a kind of a backbone of nodes that go all the way from east to west, covering the whole country. As well as that, we are the only truly global CDN that have our own nodes within China. So we have 26 nodes located throughout the country. And that's really because of those issues with the ISP. So we make sure that that content can be delivered quickly, no matter what ISP and end user is coming in on. And that actually allows us to actually get through the Great Firewall quickly and deliver that content. And the way we do that is by actually creating a fast, secure tunnel over the internet using our nodes, and we deliver that content quickly and very close to the end users. As well as that, we have our own in-country experts in China, so they help with licensing, regulations, and monitoring. And the way I generally think of that is, for instance, in the UK, if you're trying to apply for your passport, you can either go through all the forms yourself, and you may make mistakes. If you then send those off, you'll then be told, okay, that doesn't comply, you've made these errors, it gets sent back and the process starts again. Or you can take it to the post office and they'll help you through the process and actually check it first. So when the application goes off, it goes through with flying colours. And that's what we do. We generally find that if somebody is applying for a license themselves, it can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks or longer. And we can generally deliver within 2 weeks. The fastest I've ever seen it done was in 2 days, but that is the exception to the rule. And just a bit about CDNetworks there. So I'd just like to thank you all for your time, and seen a few things flashing at the top of the screen, so I'm not sure if we have any questions. But if there are, please feed them through and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, David. Some very interesting things for us to be aware of in these new digital environments, and it sounds incredibly different to what many of us are used to. So thank you for highlighting some of the key do's and don'ts. As David mentioned, there is time for questions, so do please type them in now and we can take them in a moment. As you're typing them in, let us come back to the poll that we asked at the beginning of the session, which was about how forgiving you think users are in China and Russia of a slow performing website. So you should be able to see the results on your screen now. We can see the vast majority of you, almost all of you in fact, think that they would just go to a competitor or another website to do exactly the same thing, which is pretty much what we would expect, certainly within Europe and America. A few of you thought they might try again later, but nobody thought that they would take the task offline. The actual results, I think I just have as a voiceover. You might be encouraged to hear that they're actually a lot more forgiving than many of you thought, with 66% of them saying they would try later. And about 30% would go to another site, and a small percentage, about 4%, would try and complete the task offline. So that's certainly a piece of good news, in that perhaps users are a little bit more generous with us than we might be here. But thank you all for participating in that, and those results will be available in the recording as well. So we have had some questions coming in. The first one is from Tom, and he said, how much does it cost to set up inside the firewall in China? Do you have any indication on that, David?
I personally don't. Again, it depends on what stage you're going from. So if you don't have an office, if you don't have an employee, then there's going to be that investment up front, because that is the basics of what you need to actually apply for that license. Actually applying directly to the ministry, I'm afraid I don't have that off the top of my head.
Thank you. And I have got a question here from Lindsay. She is saying, if you work with a Chinese online agent for supplying tickets, do you think we should choose one based in the UK or our home market? Because she thought there were different rules in China with regard to underselling, price matching, etc. Do you have any advice on that, David?
Well, firstly, I'd say I mainly talked about the ICP Bayan license here, which is to do with delivering content. If you're actually selling or having e-commerce on the site as well, then there is a ICP license. So they are two separate things. There's an ICP and an ICP Bayan. So as soon as you're doing anything with e-commerce and actually selling things on the site, you'll need an ICP license as well. So I think as long as whoever is providing you with those services, as long as they have those relevant licenses, then that would mean that they are adhering to all the regulations, and you shouldn't have any issues. Now, whether that's a UK company that has an office in China, so they can get the license that way, or whether you go directly to the source, as long as they have those actual licenses, then I think it should be okay. But again, as always, you can ask if the UK supplier that you're going to, what experience do they have of working in China, and just kind of double check and see what experience they do have.
Oh, thank you. And we have another coming in from Nick here, referring to the slide on user-generated content and the classification of risk. It looks like user-generated content would be viewed as high risk. Travel now relies very heavily on consumer reviews as part of the purchase cycle. Do you think sites like TripAdvisor would be classified as high risk, or if I have a review section on my own website, does that automatically catapult it into the high risk category?
It depends on how you are administering those comments. So if you have some form of internal auditing before the comments go online, then that will reduce the risk, because you can actually make sure that nobody is using your review section to post anti-government information. If it just all goes up, then that does increase the risk. But again, because it is a tourism, a body, then it will be taken on a case-by-case basis. So it doesn't mean that you definitely won't be allowed through. It just means that there'll be extra scrutiny on the site, and you'll just have to make sure that there's some policing going on the comments section.
Oh, Thank you. I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. One from Daniele. He asked, do you think it's important for hotels to have a website actually based in China? He's thinking from his perspective, they have some hotels in Italy and they'd like to gain Chinese customers. Do they need a Chinese website specifically, or can they rely on the fact that Chinese consumers could come to their already existing website?
Okay, so again, that comes down to the performance. So and also the ease of use. So if you have a multi-language version of the website, I would highly recommend to include Chinese on there if you are looking to expand in there. If you don't have the Bayan, the ICP Bayan license, you'll be able to deliver the content from outside of China, so from Hong Kong or Taiwan, but you'll then have the added problems of poor performance through trying to get through the Great Firewall, and everything else that we discussed earlier. So by having a dedicated Chinese site, it means that if there are any issues with that site, then you're not going to be risking anybody else accessing the normal site from outside. But also you can then deliver, for example, a .cn site from within China, have that dedicated to that region. And I mean, it is what we generally suggest is, to make the best of China, you really need a dedicated site.
Thank you. We've just got time for one last question, which is from Joe. She said you talked about sites being blocked, particularly in China. What are the consequences if you have been blocked? Can you reverse it by changing your content? Do you get a fine? Can you sort of pull it back if you've already been blocked once?
Okay. Yeah. So I have only ever seen one site that was blocked from being unblocked. It is very rare, but the way that they are generally blocked is they're looking at the URLs, but also the origin of where that content is coming from. So what can happen is that if a site gets blocked, then a new origin can be used and actually change the content, and generally with a different URL as well. So, and then you can go back through the process. So, but the only other issue is the ministry aren't the most helpful with supplying the reasons of why a site has been blocked. So it can actually be quite hard to actually find out what the reason was, to actually get a decent reply from the ministry to say, oh, okay, it was because of A, B, and C. So it is possible, but it is also difficult.
Thank you. I think that just about wraps up the session for today. So it just remains to thank you very much, David of CDNetworks. Very interesting presentation. It is available afterwards. And just before we say goodbye, if you are interested in continuing the digital discussions with us, do come along to Showcase Digital on the 27th of September. It's our flagship digital workshop for the year. So we will send you all some details of that after this webinar. If we didn't manage to answer your question, we will be able to take it offline. So you will get answers even if we didn't get round to them in the session. So thank you all very much for participating, and I hope to see you at the next in our series of webinars.